Good afternoon, everyone. For those who may not know me, my name is Nigel Henley, Training and Communication Specialist for the Division of Health and Wellness School Nutrition Programs team. I want to thank you for joining us for our first virtual NSLP Annual Training. Our hope today is to make sure you walk away feeling confident as possible about serving meals next school year, bearing in mind that these are uncertain and certainly uncomfortable times. Sitting in front of a computer screen for 3 hours is something that unfortunately I'm sure we're all have become accustomed to over the last 4 months, but we recognize it's still a large ask and certainly not fun. I know how many of you look forward to Kahoot each year for our annual trainings. Unfortunately, we won't be able to break up today's content with fun Kahoot quizzes. However, we do have a couple of breaks throughout today's training to allow time to get up, move around, and stretch out during the training. As I can imagine, many of you have come prepared with questions that you must have answered today. With that being said, the team will do their best today to make sure we provide answers to all of those questions. We're going to address your questions in 3 ways today. First, as you think of questions pertaining to the topics today, feel free to send them to the team using the chat feature. Earlier, I sent a couple of polls in the chat. If you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you will see a chat icon. It's going to be a text bubble with 2 lines of chat in it. That will be the chat feature. If you have found that chat feature and you're there and you're able to chat, go ahead and send us a quick hello so that we know you found it. If you do not see that chat, I'm going to offer 2 options. One, log out and log back into the training. Sometimes that remedies the issues with the chat. And the second thing is, if you're on your mobile device, the chat feature is actually going to be in the top right corner instead of at the bottom of your screen, like if you were on your desktop or laptop. Second, to ask questions today, you may virtually raise your hand by clicking the hand icon, which coincidentally is right next to the chat icon. If you select that raise hand icon or you click that icon, it will notify a team member that you have a question, and a team member will unmute your line so that you may ask your question at the appropriate time. There will also be multiple opportunities for Q&A today, so we hope no one leaves without their questions answered. Finally, today's training is recorded to ensure that we capture all of the questions asked of the team. While we're on the topic of recording, please keep in mind that all participants' lines are muted so that we may eliminate background noise and reduce background noise throughout the presentation. Again, I want to say thank you for joining us today, and I'll hand it over to Elizabeth Leach to introduce the rest of the team.
Thanks, Nigel. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our National School Lunch Program Annual Training. This year's training feels very different than trainings in the past, and we really miss seeing and being together with each of you. It's really lovely to see your names popping up in the chat feature, so it's good to virtually be here with you today. For those who I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet, I'm Elizabeth Leach, the School Nutrition Programs Manager here at OSSE. While we have quite a bit of content to cover today, I want to start out with the most important thing, which is thanking each of you. Every year you spend your time working so that DC students can have nutritious food, fueling them to learn each and every day. Since March, you've been asked to provide those meals, but do so with countless hurdles to cross, which I can only imagine has felt something like attempting a Ninja Warrior course. But through all of these hurdles, you've pushed forth and haven't let anything stop you from making sure that DC students have had meals. From March 16th through now, countless breakfasts, lunches, snacks, and supper meals have been served to DC students. We know that those meals are continuing to be served each and every day. The questions that we've received from you and your colleagues have been all about how do we get this done and how do we make sure students have access to meals? We realize that you and your colleagues have put time aside from being with your family and loved ones and have possibly taken on health risks, all to make sure that DC students have access to meals. From OSSE, we want to say thank you for the work that you've done and the work that we know you continue to do. And I want to share a video now that also expresses our thanks and highlights how much we think of each of you as a school food hero.
As the 2019-2020 year comes to an end, the School Nutrition Association, parents across the country, and all of the children you fed want to thank you and celebrate the heroic and extraordinary work you've done during the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's to you.
Thanks. So here you can see an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We will start with some introductions and objectives for today's session, hear updates on current health and safety guidance, and then spend the majority of time focusing on the nuances of serving meals in the 2021 school year, which we know looks very different than anything we've ever done before. Throughout today's training, you'll be hearing from OSSI as well as some of your colleagues from various school food authorities. While our focus will be on providing school meals, we will also discuss how students and families can receive food support outside of the school nutrition programs. We have question and answer sessions specific to each content area peppered throughout our time today, and we also have 2 5-minute breaks planned throughout today's session. In addition to those 5-minute breaks, we encourage you to stand up, stretch your legs, do anything you need to do to get that blood flowing, as we know that being in a virtual session like this for a couple of hours can be challenging. For those who have been listening to our bi-weekly call sessions, some of the information we will be presenting today will be familiar to you. We won't go into as deep a dive on each topic as we did in the bi-weekly calls, but we will be reviewing some of the same content. We're doing this to ensure that everyone has the most up-to-date information they need to plan for the coming school year. Guidance is changing on a week-to-week and sometimes day-to-day basis right now, so some information, even from our most recent bi-weekly call, has been slightly updated. Speaking of guidance that is changing on a day-to-day basis, we found out earlier today, as did I'm sure many of you, that DCPS has announced that they will be starting the school year in a remote posture through early November. And we know that changes focus for some. We know that many charters and private schools may align their schedules with DCPS. So we do go into a bit of detail throughout today on serving meals in school buildings. We do know there are some folks still doing that, but we also know some may be shifting more towards remote instruction, and we'll be covering that in depth today as well. Even if folks are starting in a virtual posture, the information we'll be presenting about safely providing meals to students will still be applicable when students do go back to in-person learning. In the interest of time, I'll introduce our speakers from today. You've heard from Nigel and myself already. From OSSI, you will also be hearing from Caitlin Schopp, our policy analyst within our Policy and Strategic Initiatives team. Alex Dobbs, Kimberly Thompson, Ani Sweeney, and Alicia DiCamillo, program specialists with the School Nutrition Programs team. In addition, you'll be hearing from Heather Hesslink, the Director of Operations and Compliance at Creative Minds Public Charter School, and Sebastian Durand from E.L. Haynes Public Charter Schools. Traditionally, our annual NSLP training is a time where we review programmatic requirements and processes, share best practices, and generally get excited about the possibilities in the upcoming school year. It's like the equivalent of a brand new set of spatulas for us. Well, we know nothing is traditional about this year or this year's training, so we want to share the objectives we identified as most important right now. Our objectives for today are that each of you representing your school food authority will be able to identify and compare options for meal service to students, as well as customize your programs to meet the needs of your students. That you'll understand updates for the coming school year, including updates per the Healthy Schools Act and COVID-19 waivers. That you'll recognize the importance of developing food and employee safety protocols, ensuring safety standards. That you'll feel empowered to provide meals to students in a safe environment. And that you'll know how to relay information about food resources available in the district. Additionally, we want to make sure you know where to locate guidance, resources, and tools to support you in operating your meal programs. We know those are a number of goals and pretty lofty, and I really think it can be all summed up in empowering you to provide meals to students in a safe environment. To dive into our first area of content, I'm pleased to introduce Caitlin Schock, a policy analyst within our team, our policy and strategic initiatives team within health and wellness.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Liz. And I would like to start with reinforcing the gratitude that we feel for all of you for the work that you have been doing and continue to do to make sure that our students are fed healthy and nutritious meals every single day. That said, I'm going to start off this afternoon with a bit of an overview of OSSE's guidance related to reopening schools related to health and safety. Our guidance is based on guidance from both DC Health and the CDC. So to give you a little bit of perspective around the why, we're using a public health lens here. So DC Health, as public health professionals, are really viewing our work to reopen schools as safely as possible as a way to minimize risk. So we're trying to minimize and control the spread of the virus. And as you go about your work in schools, it's important to keep this lens in mind. What we're really boiling this down to is, imagine if there is someone in the school that has the virus, but you don't know who it is. So what would you do? What steps should we take? Different actions to prevent the spread of the virus. And as we go through these requirements, that's the frame that we're using that we're going to want to keep in mind. It's the rationale behind all of the requirements that we'll talk through. So what we know about COVID-19 in the district, we know that we're trending in the right direction, but there's still a lot of unknown, particularly around the impact on children and youth. This is new and different for all of us. We also know that the district has a high death rate and that we have a lot of residents who are in high risk categories. So that's another reason why this is so important to prevent the spread in our schools, because we know that even if children are not as likely to be affected, that they live in homes with people who are high risk. And we need to make sure that we're keeping students, staff, essential visitors safe in our schools, and then also keeping the folks that are in students' households safe. So one of the important principles that we'll talk through is we need to make sure that schools are serving meals following all physical distancing and hygiene requirements. And I'll go into that a little bit more in the next slides. So as Liz mentioned at the start here, we know that a lot of schools, things are changing as of today as far as whether or not school will be in person, but we also know that meals might still be in person, or if they're not right away, they will be at some point this school year. So what we're trying to make sure is that schools are ensuring appropriate physical distancing. So what that means is that we need to make sure that we maintain a distance of 6 feet between all individuals to the maximum extent feasible, and that's both in indoor and outdoor settings. So for indoor settings, classes or activities, there can be no more than 12 individuals, that's including students and staff, clustered in one room. And there is an option for one additional staff member to briefly join the group if that is necessary. And then for outdoor activities, each group of 12, or again, briefly 13 individuals, must interact only with their own group and not mix between other groups. And then each group must have extra physical space, meaning more than 6 feet, between them and the next group. So what I really want to make clear here is for those indoor classes or activities where there can only be 12 or briefly 13 people in a space, that is regardless of room size. So even if your school has a large cafeteria or auditorium or gymnasium, there can still only be 12 or briefly 13 individuals in that room at the same time. So then we can move on to talk a little bit more about physical distancing, hand hygiene, and cleaning. So to the extent feasible, schools are highly encouraged to allow students to eat lunch and breakfast in their classrooms rather than mixing in the cafeteria. If that is not possible, then you can stagger lunch by class or divide an outdoor eating area by class, and of course making sure to clean and sanitize between the groups. Schools must also pre-package meals, including any silverware, napkins, and seasonings, or serve meals individually plated. And students must wash hands before and after eating, and they may not share utensils, cups, or plates. So these are the main requirements around school meals and a little bit of the why as to why these are also important. And I will be sticking around until the Q&A section if there's any questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. So now I'll transition a bit to providing updates specific to meal programs in the 2021 school year. Last week, OSSE released meal service guidance for the upcoming school year. A link to the guidance, we will drop that in the chat box now, and this guidance will continue to be updated with new information as often as necessary. As we review the information today, if you're interested in more detail on any of the content areas discussed, we encourage you to review each of our slide decks and recordings from the bi-weekly call series we've been hosting. And we'll post a link to where you can find that on the OSSE website now as well. As you can see here, school food authorities should plan to utilize the school breakfast program, National School Lunch Program, After School Snack Program, and Child and Adult Care Food Program to serve meals starting on the first day of school for the 2021 school year. Meals can be served to students that are learning in school and those who are distance learning remotely. I want to highlight a major change in meal access across the district that I know many of you are aware of. Since mid-March, students have been accessing meals via open feeding sites hosted by DCPS, public charter schools, and community-based organizations. These sites provide meals to any student or parent or guardian picking up for a student 18 and under, regardless of if they attend that school or not. Starting with the first day of school for each LEA, students will no longer be able to receive meals via open feeding sites, and students will rely on the LEA on which they are enrolled for meals. Now, more than ever before, students in the district will be relying on school meals for proper nutrition, and now it is so important that we ensure every DC student has access to those meals that they need in order to learn each day. We appreciate and very much share the concern we've heard from many of you about students not being able to access meals close to home in their own neighborhood. Right now, we're providing guidance aligned with what is currently allowable per USDA, and we continue to be in direct and routine contact with USDA and other states. As new information is provided, or if any new updates are provided changing how reimbursable meals can be served, we will provide that information as quickly as possible. As you work within your LEA to develop plans for the coming school year, we continue to urge you to explore all options for serving meals to students both present in the building and those distance learning, and to customize your meal service operations to meet your students' needs. Last week in our bi-weekly call series, we got a lot of questions about LEAs serving meals to students in other LEAs. We are currently working on clarifying and drafting guidance to be able to share with all of you specifically on that topic. What we do know is that SFAs can only claim meals served to students within their own LEA, but we love that many of you are brainstorming and considering options for serving students in other LEAs, and as we have more detail on what and how that may be allowable, we'll provide that information. So now I'll highlight which meal programs can be utilized to serve meals. On school operating days, which includes both students learning in person and those distance learning, SFAs can serve and be reimbursed for meals using the school breakfast program, lunch program, after school snack program, and the child and adult care food program. These programs are how we have traditionally served students meals in the past, and we often see breakfast, lunch, and either a snack or supper provided. As the case in prior years, to serve after school snack or supper, an activity must be offered. Most LEAs plan for 5-day operational weeks, and so meals could be provided through these programs to be consumed on those 5 operational days. The next 2 options I'm going to highlight are less traditional, but we are in a very less traditional time right now, so I want to share them and encourage schools to use them if they meet your student needs. On non-operational days, as long as activities are offered, meals can be served through the child and adult care food program. So this could be a professional development day, breaks during the school year, or even weekends. If your LEA, for example, was operating a 5-day school week and had activities being offered on Saturday and Sunday, you could be serve and be reimbursed for up to 7 days worth of meals. The last option for providing student meals is through the summer food service program and seamless summer option. Again, many of you are utilizing these programs right now and providing traditional summer meals. SFSP and SSO can also be used if a school has to close unexpectedly, for example, if there is a hurricane or earthquake. But as a reminder, COVID-19 and distance learning is no longer a justification for an emergency or an unanticipated school closure. Lastly, SFSP and SSO can be utilized if schools have longer than 10 or 15-day breaks, which happens more often with those operating year-round school calendars. Now we're going to take a look at the 5 waivers that are in place for the coming school year, and these are in place through June 30th, 2021. I'm going to provide a high-level overview of what each waiver allows and discuss how to elect the use of each waiver, and there's additional detail on each of these waivers in our written policy guidance. The first is a non-congregate feeding waiver, and this allows for consumption of meals off-site and outside of group settings, which we know is extremely important in reducing the spread of the virus. This waiver specifically allows for meals to be served via a grab-and-go model, curbside pickup, mobile or bus routes, and even home delivery. The second waiver provides flexibility for meal service times, meaning meals can be provided outside of the traditional breakfast serving time or lunch serving time, for example. Because meals don't have to be served within their traditional service time, up to 7 days worth of meals can be provided at the same time as we talked about. The third waiver allows for parents or guardians to pick up a meal for a student without the student being present. And we know, again, this is extremely important in reducing the number of people traveling around the city to pick up meals. The fourth waiver is a meal pattern flexibility waiver. SFAs should plan to meet meal pattern regulations, but if you're having a targeted and justified reason why you cannot meet the meal pattern while minimizing potential exposure to the virus, you can apply to waive a specific meal pattern requirement, and we will review those requests on a case-by-case basis. Lastly, the high school offer versus serve waiver allows for high school students to be served a 5-component lunch without being provided the options required under the offer versus serve model. So now that we've discussed each waiver, I know folks want to know how to elect the use of each waivers. Last week, when we released our policy guidance, we also released a waiver request form, which I see that the link has already been dropped in our chat box now to that request form. So SFAs should complete each tab on the waiver request form associated with the waivers they want to utilize this coming school year and email it directly to their program specialist for review and approval. We will be prioritizing review and approval of these waiver request forms. And just to proactively answer some questions we've received in the past, there is no specific due date for these waiver request forms other than they must be approved prior to you using these waivers in your meal service. So we encourage you to submit them as soon as you're able, and we will expedite the review and approval process as much as we can. And with that, I will hand it over to Nigel for a poll.
Hello again, everybody. So I just initiated our second poll for today. Should be in the chat feature now. Look for that orange bubble in that chat icon to find that poll. The question is, do you plan on applying for a meal service waiver for the upcoming school year? Your options, yes, no, and if you're still thinking about it, you can select that maybe button. Select your answer and then hit submit vote, and we will see the results coming in real time. It looks like I only have 3 votes so far, so go ahead and send your vote. We have a couple of yeses and some maybes, no no's, so that's good. That means at least most folks are going to be applying for waivers for this school year. Also, Paul PCS says absolutely they will be submitting some waivers, or at least one waiver. I'm going to leave this poll open. It's going to be live in the chat for quite a while. So if you haven't voted yet, you can go in and submit your response to the poll at any point. But I will leave that open for you all.
Okay, and now I think Ani Sweeney will help us facilitate our first round of Q&A.
Thanks, Liz. Good afternoon, everybody. I encourage you to continue to drop your questions into the chat throughout the training. And I think this is worth repeating. So this is a great question. Liz, could you go over again? Can students go to any campus in their LEA? Is this correct?
Great question. And the short answer is yes. LEAs can serve meals from any site within their LEA to any student enrolled within their LEA. So if you, for example, I'll give an example. If your school site is located in Ward 5, but you have a student that travels there from Ward 7, they can attend another one of your LEA's sites in Ward 7 to pick up a meal. Additional guidance surrounding how this would be done will be released in our next version of our policy guidance. What I will emphasize is that a proper accountability and point of service method must be in place to ensure that the meal is accounted for correctly. And that gets a little complicated depending on if an LEA is electing CEP all district-wide in every one of their sites, or if they are CEP at some sites, and if students at other sites receive meals based on their free, reduced, or paid eligibility. So again, the short answer is yes. An LEA with multiple sites can serve any of their students at any of their sites as long as there are proper accountability procedures in place.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, regarding the seamless summer option, this is for the timeline. And so can we start the school year in seamless summer if we're not CEP?
Great question. So I want to reiterate. So the answer is no. You cannot serve reimbursable meals through the seamless summer option once your school year begins. Once the school year begins, you must be serving and claiming for reimbursement for meals through the school breakfast program, school lunch program, and after school snack program. The reason that folks were able to utilize the seamless summer option before is because USDA deemed distance learning or virtual learning as an emergency and an unanticipated school closure. Since July 1st, it is no longer considered an emergency or an unanticipated school closure. So once the school year begins on your first day of school, you must use our more traditional school meal programs.
Great, thanks. What does activities mean? Would asynchronous learning activities qualify?
Great question. And activities, traditionally when we think of after school snack or after school supper, activities have to be provided along with those. So I'll give an example. If we know that a school is offering a chess club and a ballet class and things like that, those are activities that are offered during after school programming very frequently. But if there are just students around the school, like we have to see maybe in secondary schools, those students aren't engaged in an activity. So if folks are needing a further definition, maybe throughout this training, we can pop that in the chat box for a further definition. I will say that USDA has not yet released whether virtual activities are considered activities, although we anticipate they will announce that those are considered activities in due time.
Okay, great. The next question is, if students are engaged in distance learning, can they still receive after school care snack program or CACFP supper?
Yes, so again, the requirement for serving after school snack or supper is that there be an activity offered. So if there are activities being offered after school, after distance learning school, let's say, absolutely, those can be served and be reimbursed for.
Okay, and our last question is, after the waiver request form, will they be in Orchid or submitting the form is enough?
Great question. So the reason we're asking folks to submit them via email is because we know you want them expedited as quickly as possible. And so once your waiver request form is approved by your program specialist, we from OSSI will upload it to your NSLP application. So it will be attached to your NSLP application for this year.
Okay, great. That's all the questions for right now. A big thank you to Caitlin for joining us today. And next up, we have Alex Dobbs reviewing best practices for preparing meals. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Alex.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Ani. All right, so let's talk about preparing meals this school year. So we know preparing meals is going to look a little different this school year. The meals will be prepared most likely in your normal prepping area, and ensuring all food service staff are following the current food safety guidelines. SFAs should institute measures to physically separate and increase distance between employees, volunteers, other coworkers, students, and their families, such as plan menus, production, and food preparation schedules to allow employees to maintain the recommended social distance of 6 feet while working when possible. Use tape to mark 6-foot workstations so boxes or stripes on the floor, in the kitchen, food service area, and food delivery points where interactions with students, families, drivers, coworkers, etc. may occur. Stagger shifts, start times, and breaks as much as possible. Inform and remind third-party delivery drivers and any suppliers about social distancing, face covering, and hand hygiene requirements. Routinely clean, sanitize, and disinfect surfaces and objects that are frequently touched, such as kitchen countertops, cafeteria and service tables, door handles, carts, and trays. Conduct frequent cleaning of entrances, employee break rooms, rest areas, and other common areas, focusing on surface and objects that are touched by multiple people. So staff should wear gloves whenever handling food products and change gloves and wash hands when changing activities. So hand washing is emphasized now more than ever, and staff must be diligent and wash their hands before and after prepping food. Key times to wash hands include before and after a shift, before and after a break, after using the restroom, before eating or preparing food, before putting on and taking off disposable gloves when preparing food, after touching objects with bare hands, which have been handled by other staff, customers, or visitors, such as tables, trays, bags, after blowing your nose, coughing, or sneezing, after putting on, touching, or removing a cloth face covering, and after touching your cell phone. Once the meals are prepared, they are then packed out depending on the type of service being used. We will see a variety of different ways to serve food in this training. If you are serving meals in the classroom, it is ideal to pack out meals in temperature-controlled bags. If you are serving meals from a grab-and-go cart, the meals may be put into a bag or bin and then onto the cart. If serving from a kiosk or cafeteria serving line, the meals will likely go directly into the serving area. If sending meals home with students, the type of carrier should be considered. Are the meals being sent home in a box, bag, easy for student transport, etc.? Keep hot food hot and cold food cold. Not only does this align with proper food safety, the food also tastes better when served at the temperature it is intended to be served at. Regardless of your serving method, ensure that each bag, bin, cart, serving line has all the required components of a reimbursable meal. So at lunch, each classroom or cart will need a grain, meat alternate, fruit, vegetable, and 2 types of milk. So we already know meal service is going to look different this school year. We're going to cover eating meals in the classroom, grab-and-go meals, and serving meals for students that are distance learning. Okay, so let's talk about on-site service first. So we just heard this morning that DCPS is going to start off virtually. However, there may be some charters may still decide to have students do in-person learning. So we're going to briefly talk about students that are in person. Also, as a side note, I want to call out that we understand how challenging this is with information and guidance that's constantly changing. So we will continue to provide guidance and trainings to you all after this training, especially as guidance changes. So we did a deep dive into serving meals in the classroom on the first open call and heard how 2 SFAs successfully serve students in the classroom. We're going to do an overview of that call now. If you would like more information, the link to that recording for the open call is at the end of this presentation. So most likely, if you're feeding kids on site this year, they will be eating meals in the classroom. There are 2 types of serving methods for eating meals in the classroom, either meals delivered directly to the classroom or meals served via the grab-and-go style. These service models make participation convenient by serving in places where children can easily access the meal, such as in classroom or hallway kiosks, and limit the extent that students mix with each other and with students from other classes or grades. The big difference between the 2 serving models is that if meals are delivered directly to the classroom, the students are being served in their classroom and do not leave. If meals are served via grab and go, then students are going to pick up their meals outside the classroom and return to the classroom to eat. With all meal service models, it is important to engage administrators, staff, teachers, and parents early in the planning process to ensure success when schools reopen. It is critical that each plan include a healthy cleaning regimen and that proper training is provided to staff and students. It is also important to remember this is not a one-size-fits-all model. You may decide you want to serve the lower school via meals delivered to the classroom and the upper school via grab and go, or you may have one campus do all in grab and go and another do all delivery. So how does eating meals in the classroom work? Eating meals in the classroom is the same as an alternative breakfast serving model, such as breakfast in the classroom or grab and go. So if you're already operating either of these 2 methods, then you're already familiar with how these serving methods operate. Meals are prepped in the kitchen or serving area, following all the current food safety rules and regulations that we just discussed. The meals are then packed out and delivered to either the classroom or designated area for grab and go, or they can even be picked up from the cafeteria. Point of sale, or what we call POS, is taken, meals are consumed, and then there's cleanup. So delivering meals is where we see a difference in the 2 types of serving models. If serving meals in the classroom, the meals get delivered directly to the classroom. If a school is using the grab and go option, then the location of the grab and go cart should be considered. For grab and go, we often see this done via food service cart. Grab and go does not have to be done from a cart, however. You could have a table set up in a hallway where the food is staged. You could use the gym or the auditorium or even the cafeteria to serve the meals. Grab and Go just allows students to pick up meals from a convenient location. For both methods, the person serving the meals and taking POS needs to know the components of a reimbursable meal. Tables and chairs must be cleaned and sanitized before each meal. A teacher or designated staff member will serve the meals. If meals are delivered directly to the classroom, we often see teachers serving the meals. If meals are served via Grab and Go, we often see a food service worker serving the meals, but that doesn't mean that's always the case. If a school is serving the meals from the cafeteria or another potentially high traffic area, then more things need to be considered. Schools should schedule times that classroom can pick up their food and ensure those times are staggered. For example, classroom A could pick up their meals at 11 and then classroom B picks up their meals at 11:15. This would help ensure that there are 12 people at a time in the cafeteria or high traffic area, as well as ensure that there is not a backup causing a large group to form while waiting for their food. Remember, schools can only have 12 people in a room at the same time. So if you are serving from your cafeteria and you have 3 servers working, only 9 people may enter and 3 must wait outside of the cafeteria and wait for someone to exit before entering. POS is taken at the time of service. POS can be taken via a CEP check sheet, roster, or electronically. Each serving line or place meals are served needs to do their own POS. So if serving meals in the classroom, each classroom should have their own POS sheet or do their own. If serving meals via Grab and Go, each location needs to have the ability to take POS. I know POS is going to be more nuanced this year, and we're going to do a deep dive into POS on our next biweekly call. Additionally, we had some great questions come up around POS in our call on Tuesday. With a lot of electronic POS, I'm familiar with systems that allow you to go in and enter 1 day's worth of data for that day, but I'm wondering if there is a POS system out there that will let you enter multiple days worth of data with 1 entry. So if you're familiar with this system and your system does that, you can shoot me an email or chat it right now. I'm just interested to see if that's a possibility. So then once students are done eating, they will discard their waste and teachers or school staff must wipe down their desks. Eating meals in the classroom has a ton of benefits, but we know it may seem intimidating if this is brand new for you. So I want to introduce Sebastian from E.L. Haynes, who can highlight some of the benefits about eating meals in the classroom. On our first open call, we heard a deeper dive from 2 SFAs. One of them was Sebastian on the operations around serving meals in the classroom. So again, if you're interested in hearing more about serving meals in the classroom, I definitely recommend revisiting that open call. All right, Sebastian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you for having me. I'm just very quickly going to highlight some of the benefits of serving in the classrooms, particularly when it comes to the elementary school level. However, those can be applied to, I believe, all the way to high school. Allowing students to stay in their classroom on having lunch together in a smaller space really allows a more engaging time for them if we believe that meal time is not just about putting fuel in our bodies, but actually is a time where culture is developed and created, where conversations are made. This serving in the classroom really allows that. It is an informal time during their day where they can really deepen their connections. It also saves quite a lot of time, particularly in terms of transitions or waiting in line. Managing a cafeteria usually takes, brings its challenges. So staying in the classroom actually saves a lot of time in transition and particularly allows flexible transitions for each of the students. The example I gave is if a student eats faster than others, he or she can clean up their space, go to a corner, either start reading and catch up on some reading or simply finish up some work on activity that has not been completed in the morning. Because it's in the room with our teachers actually take that time to actually support those who might need that extra time on specific activities. And also we realized that it's because teachers are deeply engaged in more informal space and time, they actually have a better understanding of the students' life at home. This is where conversations go in deeper with them on what their challenges might be, where trust is built. And we realized that as a culture, it was one of the great assets of having those meals served in the classroom. That said, it does bring a lot of logistical work on the back end. We spend a lot of time at the beginning of school year to train the teachers on compliance, meal requirements, etc. So when they do, when they are in the classroom on do the POS, they actually do not have to spend all their focus on compliance. They understand it at the beginning, and they're really focused on the interactions with students. So we're trying as much as possible early on to make it as easy as possible for them, so they are actually part of the team and they understand where we come from as an admin team and the compliance that lives behind meal service, while for them still use this time as a teaching time, as an enriching time. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to send me an email. As Alex said, there is a pretty good recording of the logistics behind this meal service in the classroom that we've done a few weeks ago, and that is available via OSC resources. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sebastian. And I see that your email's here. So if you guys have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out to him. All right. I think next up we have a video on our school lunch heroes.
Hello. How many we have? 3.
Hello, everybody. Here is Chef Jose Andres. People of America, today you have to join me to give thanks to the men and women that provide school lunches every single day.
We make our own chili from scratch.
My favorite thing to cook is anything smothered in our homemade cheese sauce.
Today is National School Lunch Heroes Day.
Over 30 million children rely on the National School Lunch Program, and this number is increasing with more families in need.
Right now, it is 4:30 in the morning, and I am getting ready to begin the day for our emergency feeding service.
We are distributing meals on Mondays each week and providing students with a week's worth of breakfast and lunch.
I have talked to families and seen the fear and worry in their eyes.
COVID-19 has shown us that to feed our children in the schools, even through a crisis, is the most important thing we can be doing.
Getting ready for the next day. It's Friday.
The people that provide those lunches, the men and women, our heroes, because you are putting your lives at risk. All of America is thankful to you.
We'll be here providing those same meals and those same smiles to you, just like we always have been.
Okay, so before we go into serving meals and distance learning, let's do a 5-minute break right now so everyone can get up, stretch, get some water. So it's 1:56. We'll come back at 2:01. And while you guys are on break, I'm going to send a question to the chat so you guys can start thinking about how will you create a healthy school community for the upcoming school year. Okay, so we'll see you guys back here in 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'm going to send it over to Kimberly, and we'll talk about meals and distance learning.
Thank you. Good afternoon, this is Kimberly. So now I'll transition to providing information specifically for meal service for distance learning for the upcoming school year. As students return to school next month, students may be receiving in-person and distance learning instruction. The flexibilities and waivers USDA released will allow meals to be served to both students who are in person in school learning and those that are in distance learning environments. Because of these waivers, SFAs can serve meals to distance learning students through the following models: grab-and-go meals, multiple meals, bulk food items, parental guardian pickup, and home delivery meals. Additionally, I want to highlight key considerations of meal service for distance learning, which includes the election of waivers, accountability and point of service, record keeping, food safety considerations, and costs and staffing. Alex will discuss these items in more detail later in the training. Now I'll provide an in-depth overview of each meal service for distance learning. Many school food authorities may already be familiar with the grab-and-go model of service, especially as it relates to the alternative breakfast serving model that Alex just spoke about. For in-person and distance learning meals, I'll touch on the key elements. I also want to add that Deanna from KIPP DC presented on the last biweekly call in first annual training on how KIPP served grab-and-go meals during the pandemic. I encourage all attendees to review these presentations at the end of this presentation. For grab-and-go meals, though, school nutrition staff packs the meals into bags to be picked up from designated areas. Meals are unitized or can easily be picked up. Packaged meals include all necessary silverware, napkins, and seasonings. This model can include all meal types: breakfast, lunch, and snack, in addition to supper as needed. Meals can be consumed in the classroom or at home. Lastly, point of service is taken during meal distribution. The second model of service is providing multiple meals or days worth of meals. In this model, SFAs can provide more than 1 day's worth of meals and up to 7 days worth of meals to eligible children via a single pickup day or multiple pickup days. For this model, SFAs must inform students on how long each menu item can remain in the refrigerator and continue to be safe for consumption. Additionally, SFAs should use CDC guidance for storing leftovers when planning their menu. SFAs should provide students with the menu for the week and guidance on cold food handling, holding and reheating, to ensure all students are following proper food safety procedures. Menus should ensure that the food will last for 7 days or it can be replaced with a shelf-stable item. Lastly, SFAs should provide instruction for meals that are not to be consumed before the last day that they can be safely stored in the refrigerator and need to be discarded. Now I'll walk everyone through 2 examples. The first example deals with a student who is receiving a hybrid learning model at school and at home. The student attends school in person on Monday and Tuesday. All meals are served on Monday and Tuesday are consumed in the classroom. On Tuesday, the student takes home meals for Wednesday through Friday. Point of service is taken in the classroom during meal service on Monday and Tuesday. Additionally, point of service is taken Tuesday for grab-and-go meals during distribution. All meals are claimed for the day they are consumed. For the second example, the student has elected to receive a full week of instruction at home and does not complete any learning in person at school. The student, parent, or guardian picks up 5 days worth of grab-and-go meals on a set pickup day and time. Point of service for all 5 days is taken on the distribution day, but meals are claimed for all 5 days of service. Note that SFAs may choose to operate various modifications of these examples, such as having 2 pickup days instead of 1, or a different mix of in-person and distance learning days. After walking through the examples of serving multiple meals, let's look at sample communication SFAs can provide students and families. This graphic is an example of a menu for multiple meals for grades kindergarten through 8th grade. This menu covers 2 days worth of breakfast and lunch meals. The amount of each component is specified and reheating instructions are provided for the meat component or the grilled chicken. The third model of service is bulk food items. SFAs may decide to provide students bulk food items that contribute to multiple days worth of meals. As you may have noticed, several of these models of service build upon one another. For SFAs interested in providing bulk food items, SFAs must provide to students the required food components in the proper minimum amounts for each reimbursable meal being claimed, ensure that food items are clearly identifiable as making up a reimbursable meal, and provide menus with instructions indicating which items are to be used for each meal and the portion sizes. Additionally, SFAs should consider whether households have access to needed appliances, if only minimal preparation is required, and SFAs must consider food safety, storage, and cooking resources for a family to properly store and serve the bulk food items intended for the multiple days. Now let's dive into some specific examples by walking through this graphic. As a note, these examples were pulled directly from USDA's Providing Multiple Meals at a Time guide, which we included a link to in the last biweekly call. Attendees can reference the link again at the end of the presentation. So let's review the example. The picture on the slide demonstrates breakfast and lunch, minimum amounts of food needed for a 2, 3, or 4-day distribution. This example is helpful for the menu planner and the student or family to understand the contents of bulk food items. The orange boxes show common container sizes of milk cartons. For example, a 2-day menu for kindergarten through 8th grade students providing 1 quart of milk would be sufficient to meet the meal pattern requirements because it provides 8 ounces for 4 different meals and a quart is a common container size. However, for a 3-day menu, a student would need to receive 1.5 quarts of milk or 48 ounces to meet the daily meal requirements of 8 ounces. Since 1.5 quarts is not a common container size, a vendor would need to round up to 2 quarts of milk to provide enough milk. The fourth model of service is parental guardian pickup. SFAs may allow parents or guardians to pick up meals for a student without the student being present. Parents may pick up meals at the end of an in-person learning day or another specified pickup day or time. For parental guardian pickup, point of service is taken when the adult picks up the meal or multiple meals. SFAs electing to utilize the parental pickup waiver will also be required to submit an accountability plan to ensure program integrity. The plan should include a process to ensure that meals are distributed only to parents or guardians of students enrolled in their LEA, and a process to ensure that duplicate meals are not distributed to any child. Now let's review an example of how to claim the meals. For example, a parent picks up 5 days worth of meals for their child who elected full distance learning. Meals should be accounted for and documented for each of the 5 learning or operational days, not just the 1 day of pickup. While meal patterns is not a model of service, it is a key requirement of any model implemented for students in an in-person or distance learning environment. OSSE encourages SFAs and sponsors to maintain and meet the nutritional standards for each program to the greatest extent possible. If there are specific and justified reasons the meal pattern cannot be met based on disruptions to the availability of food products resulting from impacts of COVID-19, OSSE may waive the requirement that meals meet the meal pattern requirements. Additionally, SFAs can waive 1 or more specific food components with justification. SFAs are not relieved of their obligation to meet meal modifications for participants with disabilities. Lastly, when planning a non-congregate meal service, SFAs should also consider how individuals who require meal modifications will be identified and served. The last model of service is home delivery. This model is the most complex of the 5 because it involves several steps. I've highlighted the steps in the slide, and after I review the home delivery process, we will hear from Heather Hesslink with Creative Minds International Public Charter School on their processes for implementing home delivered meals during the pandemic under the Seamless Summer option. As for the home delivery model, SFAs may choose to implement the model for families that may want to maintain social distancing from the physical school setting and have elected full distance learning or a hybrid model of learning for their students. Meals can be delivered through a home delivery service, hand delivered by school staff, volunteers, or community organizations, for example. Once an SFA has determined that there's a need for home delivery, they must notify OSSI, and there's a series of steps that they must do and a series of steps that they should do. Interested SFAs should review the latest meal guidance from OSSI to help guide their planning. All of the information included in this slide is detailed in the guidance. Lastly, a few other key elements of home delivery includes that POS is taken when each meal is dropped off at a student's house. Now I'm going to hand it over to Heather to hear about how they fed students during the pandemic through home delivered meals.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Good afternoon. My name is Heather. Today I plan to talk about the atypical home delivery meal service model. As the end of the open feeding sites in DC is quickly approaching, many people are concerned about connecting meals to children. Schools have questions about how to feed all of their children, especially those who live far away. Last week during the NSLP biweekly call, I presented Creative Minds' pandemic home delivery model. Instead of an encore performance, today I plan to talk about factors to consider when thinking about establishing your own home delivery program. Before I go into details, I will briefly review our home delivery program. Because our program is part of the SSO, each week we deliver a meal kit directly to the homes of children, of families who have opted in. We provide 1 meal kit per child. Because it operates on the SSO regulations, all children under the age of 18 and not just Creative Minds students can participate in our pandemic home delivery program. Each week we deliver 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches in a no contact manner. Briefly, the drivers text all the families on the route when leaving to make the deliveries. Then after dropping off each meal kit, the driver texts the family that meals have been delivered. On average, we deliver about 2,500 meals a week within a 3-hour window on one day using 7 drivers. Next week, we should have connected over 40,000 meals to children in DC. If you want more information about the program, again, I refer you to the biweekly calls. Now let's talk about factors to consider when establishing your own program. When developing our program, we pondered 6 questions. The first question is why? The second question was, now that we figured out the why, should we? That is, does a home delivery meal model program meet your needs? Questions 3 through 5 address the how. And finally, question 6 allows you to reflect and improve upon your program. Regarding the objectives, there are 3 aspects to consider. The first is, does a home delivery model actually align with your organization's mission? What are your goals, or what do you hope to achieve with the program? And then, will others buy in? Like, is the program viable? For us, a home delivery model was an ideal solution to a complicated problem, as it embodies one of our core values of inclusiveness. We developed 4 simple goals, which were economic sustainability, equity, safety, and inclusion. As a charter school, we have students from all 8 wards. A home delivery model allowed us to serve all of our families without increased burden on those living far from the school. In addition, the home delivery minimized the students' exposure to COVID-19 and also minimized barriers to participation. as our model meets the children literally where they are at. Once we figured our objectives, we had to figure out the should. So we discussed the feasibility. First, we conducted an analysis, which is critical for modeling and forecasting. I used a simple Excel spreadsheet to create a model. After setting the variables and parameters, I was able to simulate different scenarios and evaluate the impact or the consequences. Using this model, we assess the pros and the cons of a home delivery model. If you choose to do your own modeling, it is important to note that the reimbursements are the same as the in-school service model. That is, there is no extra funds to cover the cost of delivery, extra equipment needed, etc. Once we determined that the home delivery model was in fact a viable solution, the next hardest part was communicating to various stakeholders. For example, we had to communicate with OSSI and discuss the potential issues that could arise, as well as secure approval and the appropriate waivers. With our board, it was actually very easy because we had been discussing a home delivery option since before the pandemic had started. For our families, the communications focused on explaining how the program would work, what they should expect, and how we were ensuring their privacy. The next thing after you determine the buy-in and you have your program ready to go is figuring out the logistics. We started with the most basic. How will we connect food to children? We focused on 3 actual aspects, which were the human power, the equipment, and the processes. For the human power, we considered 2 different models. One was using in-house staff and one was outsourcing with our food partner. With the equipment, we considered we'd need vehicles, insulated bags, if we'd need refrigeration, and other things. With the processes, we developed new procedures and systems in order to have a successful program. Some of the processes included figuring out a way to manage the opt-ins, how to optimize the delivery routes, and how to establish norms upon the delivery routines. So once we had the big picture worked out, we actually focused on the details. As this is a food program, food safety was a huge priority. For us, food safety embodied 3 factors: food stability, proper handling, and food storage. We considered 2 different models. We considered a mixed model, which was a combination of perishable and shelf-stable items, as well as a 100% shelf-stable model. We considered the pros and the cons. The mixed model, the benefits was it definitely has a more diverse menu. However, there was increased risk for improper handling or storage. And it could also require additional equipment, such as more refrigeration on site. From a logistics perspective, the shelf-stable model is logistically much simpler. As one of the first programs in DC, we realized that we were setting the precedent. Consequently, we opted for a shelf-stable model because being on the 6 o'clock news as a source of a local foodborne illness was just not an acceptable risk. Great. After we figured out our food safety component, we shifted our attention to compliance. With compliance, we considered 3 things. One was the unique opt-in component of a home delivery model. The other was the point of service and claims. And the last item to consider is long-term record retention. Currently, we are working on transitioning our home delivery program through the Seamless Summer to a weekly home delivery program for NSLP students. This will involve some changes for us. For example, it'll change who is eligible to participate. Currently, we offer our program to any child under the age of 18 who lives in DC. Starting on August 31st, we will have to shift our program to CMI students only that qualify for free and reduced lunch because we are not a CEP school. Another change is the number of meals that can be claimed for each week, because through the NSLP program, meals can only be claimed for scheduled school days. However, one of the things that will stay the same for our families is anybody participating must opt in writing. As discussed earlier, the next thing, it's a little bit different with the home service model, is the point of service versus the claim rate. For us, we make deliveries on Wednesday. Thus, we take all the point of service actually on Wednesdays. However, when we submit our monthly claims, we claim for the intended service date. In our model, the menu actually runs from the Thursday through the following Wednesday of each week. Record keeping is pretty similar to normal NSLP standards, except for there's a few new components, such as the opt-in list and tracking the delivery routes. Then after you get your program up and running, the last step is just to evaluate your program, analyze your data, and then improve your program. A critical factor for us is just assessing whether we're meeting our initial goals and we are providing the service we intended to provide and the benefits to the community. This is similar to analyzing our normal NSLP program. We periodically evaluate to streamline operations and minimize waste. Then we use the results to improve our program. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And with that, I turn it back over to Alex.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. And I saw some questions coming into the chat for Heather. So when we get to our Q&A, we can ask those to her then. So now that Kimberly has laid out the five models of service, let's take a look at these waivers again. One key element of each type of service is the election of waivers. SFAs interested in implementing a specific model of service should submit the meal server request form that is linked earlier in this presentation, and it was also emailed out to SFAs on Monday, July 20th. SFAs must obtain approval from OSSI before starting the requested meal service, so there's no specific due date for the waivers, but you have to have the waivers approved before serving any of the meals using these waivers. So as you can see from the chart, each model of meal service requires multiple waivers. The high school offer versus serve waiver will only be needed for SFAs serving in grades 9 through 12. All other grade levels will maintain the option to implement the serve model or offer versus serve for all meal types. So as you know, there are a lot of things that need to be considered when planning for serving meals this upcoming school year. Accountability and POS must be taken. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to do a deep dive into POS on the biweekly call on August 13th. SFAs should ensure they are keeping proper records, such as production records. Even if students are engaged in full distance learning, production records should still be filled out. The next element is food safety. Food safety is a key element of serving meals in any environment or setting. This is especially important during meals served in distance learning because of many factors, including serving multiple days worth of meals, transportation of meals, food storage, and reheating of meals. SFAs should review these 5 considerations when deciding which model of service to implement. How long foods may be safely stored before eating, how long foods can be stored before food quality suffers, participants' access to refrigerator and freezer space for the amounts of food and milk provided, food storage space at the meal distribution site and on meal delivery vehicles, how to communicate food safety tips to families and students. Answering these questions and concerns will help your SFA determine which model of service is most practical and feasible for your students and families, as well as support staff implementing the meal program. SFAs must still provide meal accommodations for students regardless of your serving model. SFAs should ensure they have ways to accommodate students with allergies, as well as continue to provide reasonable modifications to program meals or the meal service to accommodate children with disabilities. Lastly, OSSI has received and heard SFA's concerns over the additional cost of these different types of serving methods, and unfortunately, there's no additional federal or state reimbursement for providing meals to students in a distance learning environment. SFAs should continue to consider operational costs and staffing structure when determining their service model. For example, one SFA may decide it's feasible to operate home delivery with a third party delivering meals to students' houses, while another SFA may operate home delivery with only staff members or volunteers. A third SFA may decide home delivery is not a feasible option at all, and grab-and-go meals is the best option when considering cost and staffing structure. So as a summary, there are a number of different methods each SFA can utilize to ensure students have access to meals, whether students are learning in an in-person or distance learning environment. SFAs should customize their meal service to meet student and family needs of the school. SFAs must submit the NSLP waiver form before implementing meal service for distance learners. So Nigel, I think we're ready for our next poll.
All right, Alex, thank you so much. So I have submitted one of two polls. The first question is, how many waivers do you plan on electing for the upcoming school year? If you click the drop down, you have options 0 through 5. And once you select your answer, you hit submit. And the second poll I'm going to initiate right now is going to ask you, one second, is going to ask you what type of meal method you are considering for the upcoming school year. And with this poll, you have multiple options that you can select from, and the ability to add in an additional option if you like, or additional comments. You can select as many of these responses as you'd like for the second poll question. So taking a look right now, it looks like the majority of folks who responded are going to select 3 or more waivers. And in terms of meal service for the upcoming school year, I see lots of options there. I see some grab and go, multiple meals at a time. It looks like someone is going to do parent pickup and bulk items. So surprisingly, oh, there it is. I was waiting for home delivery to come in. It looks like one came in for home delivery. So as you can see, there is a myriad of responses. Folks are looking at utilizing all of the options in terms of meal service for the upcoming school year. As with the first few polls, I am going to leave this poll open for you all to continue to respond to. As a reminder, if you cannot see the chat, you still have the option to log out and log back in to see if that chat pops up for you. Thank you, and I will turn it back over to Liz.
Thanks, Nigel. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Healthy Schools Act. And I want to take a step back and remember the intent of the Healthy Schools Act. The DC Healthy Schools Act was developed to help schools, students, and families eat healthy, stay active, learn healthy habits, care for the environment, and create healthy school communities. And I'm going to repeat that last part, create healthy school communities. Right now, going on 4 months of being at home and knowing that we may have a number of months ahead of being at home, folks are craving community. I know the majority of information we've presented today focuses on regulations and requirements and what everyone has to do. But I also want to elevate the opportunity we have as school nutrition professionals to create healthy school communities for our students and families. I'm thankful the DC Healthy Schools Act is here to help us support in doing so. So as Alex asked you to think about, well, we went on that 5-minute break a little while ago. Alex asked you to think about a question, and the question is, what are you doing or what are you thinking about doing that contributes to creating a healthy school community? And I want to kind of open up our conversation here and encourage people to share. If you feel comfortable, we'd love to hear from you. One thing that you're thinking about doing, feel free to write it in the chat. Or if folks feel comfortable coming off mute and sharing, please do so. Just try to be cognizant of others coming off mute at the same time. If you want to raise your hand and we can acknowledge you to speak, we can do it that way too. But I will pause for a minute or so to allow people to start sharing in the chat. And again, please share one thing that you're planning that contributes to creating a healthy school community. So while folks are thinking and sharing, I'm going to share some really exciting plans that we heard from the other day. In our training on Tuesday, folks shared that they were thinking about offering virtual yoga classes and cooking classes. I see some coming in the chat now, so I'll read them aloud and make sure that folks can hear and see them. I see that some are fundraising specifically to be able to provide groceries to families. Others are planning to keep markets, to promote their meals and try new recipes to keep kids excited. I'm sure that's going to be a challenge this year, so love seeing that. Others are rolling out a wellness curriculum that will include nutrition tips and physical activity. I love seeing these guys, and I'll share one more, but encourage folks to look in the chat and keep sharing. These are really creative ideas, and I think it's helpful to see what others are doing to get the creative juices flowing. So the last one I'll share is folks are coordinating with culinary and gardening education and student support teams to create materials to send home in meal bags when families pick up. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for inspiring us a bit there. And no, we wouldn't be Aussie if I didn't share a couple of requirements with you. So we're not going to go too deep into the Healthy Schools Act here. If you want a more comprehensive review of that, we have a number of resources you can see on the right-hand side of your screen right now. We have a full Healthy Schools Act informational guide. We also have a 2-page overview into the nutrition requirements, which is kind of a cheat sheet. And there also is a webinar if you ever want to reference that. Today, I'm just going to highlight a few things that I think are important to note in the coming school year. And as we review them, please keep in mind the intent that we just talked about. The reason why the Healthy Schools Act is in place is to create healthy school communities for our students. We realize and acknowledge there are challenges in meeting these requirements this year, and implementing them may look different than they ever have before. But as you plan, please keep in mind the intent, and if you have or anticipate having any challenges, please reach out to your program specialist for additional support. So per the most recent amendment to the Healthy Schools Act, schools shall provide daily vegetarian options and are encouraged to also provide plant-based options. Schools shall provide reasonable accommodations for religious and non-medical dietary restrictions and may not require a student to obtain a note from a doctor in order to receive a plant-based option or non-medical dietary accommodation. All milk shall be unflavored. All grain products shall be whole grain rich. Another item I want to highlight is in regards to alternative breakfast serving models. We know that many schools must offer breakfast via alternative serving models. This year, we anticipate almost all, if not all, meals to be served through these alternative serving models. For students that might be present in the school building, we know that we heard from Caitlin earlier that health and safety guidance strongly recommends students eat in their classroom. For students receiving meals while distance learning, all of the methods described that Kimberly went into would be considered alternative serving models. In support of alternative serving models, we do anticipate releasing the next iteration of the equipment grant sometime in the fall of 2020, and many of the supplies and equipment needed to operate those models would be eligible under that grant. So keep your eyes out for that. One more component of HSA I would like to highlight is farm to school. As you know, SFAs should serve locally grown, locally processed, and unprocessed produce from growers engaged in sustainable agriculture whenever possible. SFAs should also complete and submit a quarterly locally grown and unprocessed tracking log. We're excited to announce that OSSI received a USDA Farm to School grant to support schools and child development facilities in finding and serving local foods. As you continue to plan for this school year, remember that your vendor or food service management company contract likely already includes requirements for local foods. Local products, whether sourced by a vendor through DoD Fresh, directly from growers, or from our school garden, can be incorporated into any meal service model, including grab and go and delivery. There's a wonderful resource from the National Farm to School Network that's linked here. And for additional resources, we encourage you to use additional resources such as the School Garden Safety Guide. One final note on HSA. I know we've received a lot of questions about HSA reimbursements. We don't have any updates pertaining those reimbursements for the coming year, but as soon as we do, we will share those out. And I believe now I'll hand it over to Ani to help facilitate our next Q&A session.
Thanks, Liz, and thank you all for your great questions. Sebastian kindly mentioned in the chat feature that he's working with Infinite Campus to try and tweak the system to serve multiple days worth of meals. And there is a request to keep everyone updated on how that goes, so please do. So now we will jump into our questions. And Heather, this one is for you. Could you tell us again who your vendor is and who delivers the meals to the family?
Sure. So currently during our pandemic program, our vendor is Genuine Foods, and they actually outsource to a delivery company called Via, and it gets delivered through Genuine Foods and Via. Starting in the fall, we actually have a new food vendor due to the NSLP RFP, and we are working to set up a home delivery program with Top Spanish.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question. Are there any lists of vendors or third-party companies for delivery?
So this is a funny question because we got this question on our vendor call yesterday. So what we did, I don't know if you guys remember, right when the shutdown started, we created an Excel sheet that had all the vendors were able to drop in their contact information, and they were able to say what kind of meals they serve and if they could do home delivery and how many days worth of meals. So we'll make sure we recirculate that around the vendors and circulate it to you all, and so it can be a sharing space for people to potentially work together.
Great, thanks, Alex. Okay, and in the chat, Danielle mentioned that they use a cab company for delivering the meals. So thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, our next question is, can you explain how to offer a variety of milk for grab and go and also for home delivery?
Sure, I'll start off on that one, but feel free to pop in if anyone has additional suggestions. So thoughts for grab and go. One way to do this, we heard from DCPS on Tuesday that the way they were doing this, so I'll share how they are, is that they had different bags packed with different kinds of milks. So when someone picks up, they have the option of taking the different prepackaged bags, but knowing that each kind has a different milk in it. So I think that's one option. Another option to utilize could be if people are picking up multiple days worth of meals at a time. If the milk, if there are different milks included in the multiple days worth of meals, that would be offering multiple different types of milk. And that method could be utilized in home delivery as well.
Thanks, Liz. Is there any additional reimbursement to cover the cost of disposable products necessary for individually packaging the meals?
Yeah, so sorry,
no.
guys. I mentioned this briefly in the slides, and we know everyone's hoping for extra reimbursement, but at this time, no additional reimbursement for any additional supplies or added costs.
Okay. Next up, a little clarification is needed for 7 days. If we are distributing 3 days worth of meals, do those meals still have to last for 7 days? I'm assuming meals have to last for however long the planned consumption is, but is the 7 days a safety buffer?
Yeah, so I can just talk about the 7 days a little bit more. I think I saw another question come through on that. So basically, you guys are allowed to give out 7 days worth of meals. So right now, if you are serving SSO or SFSP, you can claim 7 days worth of meals. Once NSLP starts, once your school year starts, you can only claim the meals for days that you are actually in school learning. And then I know we're waiting on clarification if activities on the weekend virtually would count. So that being said, you can still give out 7 days worth of food at a time, but you may not be able to claim the 6th and 7th day. So if schools, someone picks up food on a Monday, you can claim Monday through Friday under NSLP, and then you can still give 7 days worth of meals, but you can't claim the meals on Saturday and Sunday if there's not enrichment. But you don't have to give out 7 days worth of meals, and the meals don't have to last 7 days. So if you're giving out 1 day's worth of meals, 3 days worth of meals, they should last for up to 3 days if you're doing 3 days. So what you want to make sure is however many days worth of meals you're providing, you're communicating with your families that, okay, maybe I have a salad on the menu that should be eaten within 1 or 2 days, and then I have something that's a little more shelf stable that can be eaten on day 3 or 4. So however you plan your menu for however many days you're giving out, you want to make sure that information is communicated with your families. But it's up to your school on how many days worth of meals you want to give out.
Great, thanks, Alex. Okay, next up, if you want to use the home delivery method, can you deliver to a centralized pickup point, or do you have to deliver directly to a student's house?
That's a great question. We got that same question on Tuesday, and Alex, I might defer to you. I don't know that we have an answer quite yet. We've reached out to DC Health to discuss that possibility with them. Alex, and is that correct, or is there any update?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of this question more as like a food truck type question where you either deliver to a central location or maybe you deliver to a park and the truck stops and kids come and pick up meals. I am working with Department of Health because we want to ensure that that food safety is met. We want to see if there has to be a food handler present. So once we know this, we will get back to you guys with the answer.
Okay. Our last question is, what does a shelf-stable menu look like?
Yeah, so when we use the word shelf stable, the term shelf stable is something that can be held at room temperature. So meals that, sit in your pantry or can sit on the shelf for a while will be considered shelf stable. In the national school lunch world, I also think of shelf stable meals as meals that could even be in the freezer. So it's not going to expire in 1 to 2 days. It can go into the freezer and then be used on days 6 or 7. But I am going to drop a resource right now into the chat from USDA that goes over shelf stable food and what it looks like.
And Heather, I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing, but just if you do, not to call you out, I know you've had a shelf stable menu for a while, so if you feel like giving a couple examples, that might help.
Sure. So kind of a shelf-stable menu would be something that is stable until it's open. So like if you had a small container of like corn, that would be shelf-stable. But if you had a large can of corn, as soon as you open it, it's not. Menus that we have served for like breakfast is things like muffins, cereals, breakfast bars, along with some fresh fruit. So like if we've delivered strawberries, we've encouraged people to eat them on like day 1 and then had like apples for like day 5, day 6, day 7 in order to make sure that it lasts the entire time. For lunch, shelf stable are things like peanut butter sandwiches, individual packages of tuna fish, hummus. There's some options as we are exploring with our new food vendor for like pre-packaged pancakes and things like that so that they're shelf stable when they're prepped, and as soon as you open them, they are no longer shelf stable, so they're meant to be consumed.
Those are great. Thank you so much.
And sorry, before our next question, Ani, I just want to share and elevate how Heather described some fresh produce offerings that were still shelf stable. So we know apples last a very long time, and I love how you incorporated some fresh produce in there.
Ani, yes. Sorry, I'm going to plug fresh produce also because of course we want to make sure the food's safe, but you can use fresh produce that's been frozen, and that's going to last a long time in the freezer. So you can still be able to serve fresh produce, but it's just been frozen, which will expand the shelf life of it.
Okay, great. In the near future, Liz is actually going to mention a place where SFAs, we're going to give you a place to be able to share some of our resources. So I know that some of you will probably have some other great ideas for shelf-stable menus, and this will be a good place to share that. And we will be dropping that into the chat feature in the near future. I wanted to thank Sebastian and Heather for sharing today. It was really great hearing from you. And we're going to take a quick 5-minute break. So it's 2:46 now. So we will come back at 2:51. All right, welcome back, everybody. I hope you all had a nice, quick break. Next up, we have Alicia DiCamillo, and I'm going to turn things over to you now.
Great, thanks, Ani. So good afternoon, everyone. Now I'm going to walk us through some of the food resources that are available to district residents outside of the child nutrition programs. Sorry, guys. In the District of Columbia, there is a network of nonprofits who provide food to individuals who are in need. These nonprofits obtain food by purchasing food from retailers, through private and retail donations, and by receiving food from our local food bank, the Capital Area Food Bank. Food banks operate as a warehouse, providing food to intermediaries like food pantries and soup kitchens, who provide food directly to individuals in need. Food banks can also operate direct distribution programs where the food bank provides food directly to the community. In the District of Columbia, there are a number of food resources that are available at no cost to district residents. To obtain food for home preparation and consumption, meaning groceries, families can visit food pantries and mobile distribution sites across the city. In order to obtain meals that are ready to eat on site, families can visit soup kitchens. There are also a number of nonprofits who operate weekend bag programs. Weekend bag programs are designed to provide students with food over the weekend to bridge the gap between school meals offered on Friday and on Monday. There are also a number of COVID-19 specific resources that have been provided by the District of Columbia, which can all be found at the link here. These resources include information on grocery distribution sites, SNAP benefits, pandemic EBT, farmers markets, WIC, senior specific resources, and much more. I encourage you all to explore and share this resource with families if you haven't done so already. There are also 2 federal nutrition programs available to district residents that I wanted to highlight today. The first is the Emergency Food Assistance Program, TFAP, which is a program that OSSI administers in DC. TFAP is a program which provides groceries for home preparation and consumption. TFAP foods includes things like dried grains, pastas, soup, canned fruits and vegetables, shelf-stable proteins, fresh dairy, and frozen vegetables and proteins. TFAP can be accessed as often as needed by individuals by visiting food pantries across the district. Currently, we have about 70 food pantries in the district who are operating the program. To be eligible to receive TFAP, a household's income must not exceed 185% of the federal poverty line. Households are also automatically eligible if they receive SNAP, TANF, or Medicaid benefits. To note, TFAP eligibility is self-disclosed by individuals. Food pantries are not allowed to ask households for proof of income or program participation to be certified for the program. Households certify for the program annually at a food pantry and then can access TFAP as often as needed. The second is a program which specifically benefits individuals over the age of 60. This is the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, which is a program that provides a monthly box of groceries to district residents over the age of 60. To be eligible for CSFP, a household income must not exceed 135% of the federal poverty line. For information on joining CSFP specifically, please contact the Capital Area Food Bank who administers that program. So there are a couple of ways that you can easily find food resources in the district. The first is through the Capital Area Food Bank's Get Help page on their website. On this page of the website, you can enter a zip code and see a list of all of the food resources near you. The list includes the name, address, and a phone number for the sites. There's also a Get Help phone number on this webpage, which families can call to speak directly with an individual who can help them find food resources near them, sometimes even food resources that are available that same day. The second is also operated by the Capital Area Food Bank, which is a map that shows food resources across the district. By using this map, you can enter your school address, for example, and see all of the resources near you. To note, the difference between this map and the map that's provided on the District of Columbia's coronavirus website is the District of Columbia's coronavirus website has a map of food resources that are specifically in response to COVID-19, whereas the Capital Area Food Bank map has not only COVID-19 resources, but the food resources that are available on a regular basis. To find additional resources, you can also directly call any of the food resources that you find using the Get Help search or the map and ask if they have additional resources they can provide. If not, maybe they can point you to another organization who does. So now that you have this information, you're probably wondering how to best communicate this information to students and families. The first recommendation that I have is to create a brochure that has a list of all of the food resources closest to your school campus using the map of food resources in the district from the food bank. If you'd like help with developing this resource or finding the resources near you, please reach out to me directly and I'm happy to help you develop this. I would also suggest sending the Get Help phone number, webpage address, and brochure home and back to school packets for families to utilize. For high school students, I also recommend providing them directly with the brochure and Get Help phone number so that they can access the resources on their own as needed. For students who will be learning in person, it would also be good to have these resources posted throughout the school where students can easily see and access them. So there are also a number of ways that your school can directly provide support to students and families. The first would be to create a partnership with local food pantries and/or soup kitchens by calling or visiting them directly. By doing this, you could potentially create partnerships with these pantries to host pantry hours either directly before or after school hours so that students and families can access these resources on the way to or from school as they need. Also, by developing a relationship with these organizations, it can make the experience of visiting a pantry easier for students and families. If the pantries know ahead of time that students and families will be stopping by, they'd be prepared and ready to serve them. You could also provide weekend bags to students by partnering with a pantry who's operating the program and has room to expand. Chances are if you call a local pantry and they're not operating the program, they likely know someone in their network who is that they'd be able to put you in touch with. Finally, you can partner with a food pantry or other nonprofit in the district to host pop-up grocery distributions at your school. As we've heard from some schools, organizations like Martha's Table and DC Central Kitchen are providing food resources, groceries, at school campuses for students and family to pick up when they're picking up school meals. Other organizations I suggest that you could reach out to include DC Central Kitchen, Miriam's Kitchen, So Others Might Eat, Bread for the City, and there are many more. So please feel free to reach out to me if you'd like a greater list of people that you can connect with. So again, if you'd like any help either identifying organizations to partner with, help finding food resources near you, or anything else related to providing food support outside of child nutrition programs, please reach out to me directly and I'm more than happy to help you at any time. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Ani for questions.
Great, thanks so much, Alicia. And there is already a request, actually a statement that says it would be really cool to have a one-pager to hand out to families during the school year for some of the resources that you provided. So the first question is TFAP open to those with questionable immigration status?
So to be eligible for TFAP, what happens is when a household visits a pantry for the first time, to be eligible, they're handed what we call a self-disclosure form. And on the self-disclosure form, all that the individual has to provide is their name, their address. They either can check that they certify based on income eligibility or check the program eligibility that makes them eligible for the program. So if they receive SNAP, TANF, or Medicaid benefits, and then they sign the form. So immigration status has nothing to do with it. And also, as I said, all of this information is self-declared, so pantries are not allowed to ask for proof of income, proof of program participation, anything like that. One thing that they may ask for is an ID because you do have to be, to receive TFAP, you can only receive it from the state that you live in. So for example, a Maryland resident could not visit a District of Columbia pantry and receive TFAP from them. They'd have to receive it from Maryland, the state that they live in. So that could be asked, but if someone doesn't have an ID, they can show anything else that is proof that they live in the District of Columbia, but immigration status has nothing to do with it and there's no verification on that part.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, and that's actually all we have for right now. Next we have Liz Leach, and I'm going to send it back to you now.
Thanks so much, Alicia, and thanks, Ani. We have come to the last portion of our training today, and thanks for bearing with us. We know, again, it's a long time to sit in front of our computer, but we're glad you stuck through. So we have a couple of quick announcements. First is that we've created a reopening meal plans portal, which we'll drop a link in the chat to now. This is a folder within our NSLP resources Google Drive that you all will have access to contribute and edit to documents in there. So we know that so many of you have developed really wonderful resources and are in process of developing really wonderful resources for your food service staff, for your students, for your families. And we encourage you to share those with each other, to not only share what you have, but to search for others. So hopefully folks will start dropping the resources they have in there and then looking to share with others as well. Next, I will just provide a quick reminder on some upcoming due dates. So again, please submit the waiver request form for approval prior to utilizing the waivers in your meal service. So we encourage you to complete those waiver request forms and submit it to your program specialist as soon as you're able. And again, we will expedite review and approval of those as quickly as we can. As a reminder, CEP elections are due August 15th for those who are considering CEP as an option. And we're happy to work with folks and do some office hours if any folks want to talk through their CEP elections for this year. And lastly, NSLP applications are due August 31st. For those who may have not started your NSLP application yet, please note there's a new format and layout within Orchard. So as always, we encourage you to use the self-guided training. It's been updated to reflect the new format, and we have a required documents checklist that will help you gather everything needed to complete the application, all of the associated documentation prior to putting it into Orchard. And now Nigel will share some of our resources.
Thanks, Liz. So hello again, everyone. I want to take a moment to go over some of the many resources that the School Nutrition Programs teams offers you in an effort to empower you to manage your various nutrition programs. The largest and most comprehensive of those resources that we host is the NSLP Google Drive. This portfolio of resources provides guidance, templates, presentation slides, and tools for pretty much every USDA child nutrition program that's out there. When in doubt, check the Google Drive. In fact, you'll actually be able to find today's presentation in the Google Drive for you to reference moving forward after today's training. Our master responsibilities spreadsheet is also linked here, but you can also find this resource in the NSLP Google Drive. The master responsibilities spreadsheet provides outlines, and you guessed it, all of the responsibilities of school food authorities on an annual, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily basis. So if at any point you ever find yourself scratching your head wondering if you're forgetting to do something, check the master responsibilities spreadsheet. I have a lot of respect for everyone that's on the line today, and after looking at that spreadsheet, I have even greater respect for everything that you all do. That spreadsheet scares me, so I'm gonna move on and go to the next resource. Our shared calendar is accessible to all SFAs and child nutrition program staff. This calendar shows due dates for claim submissions for popular programs like NSLP and FFVP, provides a list of upcoming trainings with a registration link that you can access straight from the calendar, as well as lists out upcoming events that the Division of Health and Wellness hosts or co-host, like Strawberries and Salad Greens Day and Hear the Crunch. The 2021 calendar of deliverables also outlines claims due dates for NSLP, HSA, and FFVP, as well as provides due dates for things like grant submissions that are available. If you need to reach out to anyone on the team, you can find the SMP team contact list linked here. This has our email addresses and phone numbers if you ever need to reach out for a question that you need answered. The USDA and state agency memos webpage, as well as the School Nutrition Programs Training and Resources webpage, are both hosted on the OSSI website. I'll let you guess which one is which, but one web page provides information and links to the latest USDA waivers and guidance, as well as memos for OSSI specific, as well as memos from OSSI that are specific to COVID-19 and guidance around COVID-19. The other webpage provides resources and links to both upcoming and past trainings. On this webpage, you can also find recordings of our biweekly open calls that the team has mentioned multiple times today, as well as recordings and information and resources from some of the other programs that we host, like School Gardens and USDA Foods. The Beyond the Tray newsletter is our monthly newsletter that provides the latest information from USDA, OSSI, and community organizations. Within that newsletter, you will also find announcements for upcoming events, grant opportunities that are available, trainings that are upcoming and available, as well as an opportunity for your school to be highlighted around some of the great work that we all know you're doing. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing today. The link that's on this page will take you directly to the subscription page for the newsletter. All you need is your first name, last name, and email address, and you'll start receiving that newsletter on a monthly basis. One of our newest resources that's going to be unveiled pretty soon in the next couple of weeks is the SFA training timeline. This timeline provides a list of trainings that all SFAs should participate in, trainings that new SFA staff should participate in, as well as trainings that new staff of new LEAs should participate in. The breakfast resource folder, also on the Google Drive, but linked here for your convenience, provides resources for serving meals via an alternative breakfast serving model. This is a great resource if you're serving meals outside of the traditional cafeteria setting, or if serving meals outside of the cafeteria setting is new to you. We also mentioned today is the meal policy guidance and the waiver request form. Again, that waiver request form must be submitted to OSSI before you start serving any of the available meal service types. These can be accessed on the OSSI website, as well as they were sent out via email and in links today. Also, just want to highlight again, those biweekly calls, the recordings for those are available on the OSSI website on the training and resources page. Lastly, as Caitlin mentioned, we have the health and safety guidance for schools and the accompanying FAQ that is available on the OSSI website, linked here, also dropped as links in the chat for you all to check out. That is a lot of resources. I'm done talking. I'm going to pass it back to Liz to close out with some final thoughts.
Thanks so much, Nigel. That is a lot of resources, and I will actually just shout out one more. We heard Caitlin talk earlier about health and safety guidance, and I wanted to share that our policy and strategic initiatives team at OSSI is hosting weekly health and safety calls. So the calls for schools are 1 p.m. on Mondays, and we'll drop a link to register for those in the chat in case you're interested. They're quite helpful. So just wanted to shout that out as well. While we know you have many resources to help with your planning and preparation, again, I just want to encourage folks to reach out to anyone on our team for support or to run ideas by us. We know that these are untraditional times, and we're ready to work with you as you prepare for the school year. I want to say one more thank you on behalf of our team, on behalf of OSSI, on behalf of DC students. Thank you so much for the passion you bring to this work, the creativity you put into making sure students are still enjoying their meals, and the dedication you have to do this work. School meals is definitely not for the faint of heart, and this upcoming school year might be the toughest ever to be a school nutrition professional, but it also might be the most exciting and revolutionary year ever to be a school nutrition professional. Mindset will be critical. So with that, we will share one more video highlighting the heroes that you and your colleagues are. And we will be staying on the line after the video to engage in another Q&A. As we know, there may be additional questions. We had planned this until 4 o'clock. It is well before that now, so we're happy to stay online and continue answering questions for folks that have some. And sorry, Nigel, do we have a quick poll before we start the video?
We sure do. Thanks, Liz. So
Yeah.
I already dropped the poll in the chat. Now that we have walked through all of the content today, share with us how you're feeling now about serving meals next school year. So just click the number of stars that you feel are applicable to your level of confidence of serving meals next year, and go ahead and submit that. And while you're doing that, I'm also going to submit our last poll for the day. This poll is more of an evaluation for you all. It's to let the team know how we did on the call today. So I will go ahead and initiate that poll now. All evaluation questions and polls that have been asked today are important, but this one is just slightly a little more important, as it helps us improve the quality of training that we provide to you all, especially in this social distancing and virtual format. And it looks like we're going to be here for a while, so we need to know what we can do better to make sure that while we're in this virtual or in this distance posture, that we're providing the best support for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and initiate that evaluation poll now. Please take some time to fill that out for us while we play the video. That poll should be showing right now in the chat.
Morning, girls.
Hi, I'm Tom Colicchio. When I was a kid, my mom worked in the cafeteria, so I know the value of those who work in and out of the schools. School food professionals are putting themselves on the line for their communities during this global pandemic, continuing to feed children even when schools are closed.
Time to mask up.
Since our school district closed, we serve around 50,000 meals.
55,000.
67,000.
224,000.
Over 355,000 breakfast and lunch.
It's great to be out on a Monday to see these kids and the families.
There's definitely food insecurity here. There's a lot of unemployment, so people have been very happy that we're helping them out.
It was critical for us to be able to still serve meals, making sure that no one went hungry and that parents had opportunities to have food for their children without having to use their limited resources.
We have also spread the importance of not only supporting our program, but when they do grab a bag, they are also supporting our local farmers.
We've been able to incorporate a lot of local ingredients into these meals, which will stimulate the local economy. Some of them, in fact, have been grown right here at our school.
We have a pretty extensive farm-to-school program. We work with quite a few farmers.
We grow on a little over 5 acres of row crop land, and then we have around a little over 2 acres of orchard.
Meat producers, chicken producers.
We have some really incredible garden keepers and greenhouse workers. We want these businesses, farmers, and producers to be here when we're back to school in a normal routine.
I think our work goes way beyond just the crisis. Food service professionals were finally recognized as essential.
Ensuring that children have everything that they need.
Businesses, farmers, and producers to be here when we're back to school in a normal routine.
I think our work goes way beyond just the crisis. Food service professionals were finally recognized as essential.
Ensuring that children have everything that they need to thrive and to grow and to learn. We are one integral part of that circle.
Learn more about our national school meal programs and how you can help make sure those heroes have the resources they need to build healthy bodies and healthy communities.
No one should ever be hungry and go without food. as much food is wasted in this world. That should never, ever happen.
All right, and now we'll open back up for our last question and answer session, and I'll hand it over to Ani.
As of right now, we don't have any new questions, but we'll just take a quick pause here in case anybody wants to drop anything into the chat feature. So a great question that we had on Tuesday is, could you send the PowerPoint slide deck to all of us via email after the training?
I will answer that one. Yes, we will. So everyone will get a recap email this afternoon with links to everything that we've linked in the presentation, as well as a link to the evaluation for today's event. The PowerPoint will also be linked in that email and available on the Google Drive. And one last note, the recording of this annual training will be available on the training and resources page I mentioned a little bit earlier.
Thanks, Nigel.
And I'll just jump in one more time. I acknowledge some folks are having issues with the survey. For those still on the line, if you have a second, please click Start Survey and complete that for us. It's incredibly useful for us. Thank you.
So we had a question of how will administrative reviews be handled if the pandemic lasts through the fall?
Great question, Ani, and we don't know the answer yet. We're as interested to find out as you. So we don't know how administrative reviews will be handled. We're working through that, and as soon as we know, we'll share that information.
Okay, thanks. All right, and the last question is, for alternative breakfast serving models, are schools eligible for any additional funding this year for implementing the alternative serving models?
Great question, and thanks for asking that. We know folks are eager to hear about Healthy Schools Act funding. The $2 breakfast subsidy that was available in last school year comes from DC Healthy Schools Act funding. And so we don't yet quite have information on the fiscal year 21 budget, the upcoming budget. As soon as we do, we will share that information out with folks. I'm seeing a lot of comments about folks not being able to take the survey. Or sorry for the technical difficulties. I believe Nigel will be sending it out in a recap email after this. So apologies for folks that aren't able to complete it, and know that you'll get a link to complete it after this as well.
Well, thank you all for submitting your questions earlier today. And that concludes the Q&A portion for today's presentation.
Wonderful. Well, just one last thank you specifically to Sebastian Duran and Heather Hessling from our school food authorities who shared with us today. And a final thank you to all of you as you continue to prepare for the upcoming school year. We look forward to working with you in the coming weeks. Farewell.